So we can get those guys up. Those. All right. Who wants to start with 38?
Let's see. Thereafter, when the boy returned to the hermitage, he saw a snake on his father's shoulder. Out of grief, he cried very loudly.
Oh, brothers, the rishi who was born in the family of Ankira Muni, hearing his son cry, gradually opened his eyes and saw the dead snake around his neck.
He threw the dead snake aside and asked his son why he was crying, whether anyone had done him harm. On hearing this, the son explained to him what had happened.
The father heard from his son that the king had been encouraged, although he should never have been condemned, for he was the best among all human beings. The rishi did not congratulate his son, but, on the contrary, began to repent, saying, "Alas, what a great sinful act was performed by my son. He was awarded heavy punishment for an insignificant offense."
Oh, my boy, your intelligence is immature, and therefore you have no knowledge you have no knowledge that the best of human beings is as good as the personality of God. He is never to be replaced on an equal footing with common men. The citizens of the state live in prosperity, being protected by its unsurpassable powers.
My dear boy, the Lord, who carries the wheel of a chariot, is represented by the monarchical regime. And when this regime is abolished, the whole world becomes filled with thieves, who are at once vanquished by the who then at once vanquish the unprotected subjects like scattered lambs.
Due to the termination of the monarchical regimes and the plundering of the people's wealth by rogues and thieves, there will be great social disruptions. People will be killed and injured, and animals and women will be stolen. And for all these sins, we shall be responsible.
At that time, the people in general will fall systematically from the path of progressive civilization in respect to the qualitative engagements of the caste and the orders of society in the Vedic injunction. Thus, they will be more attracted to economic development for sense gratification. As a result, there will be an unwanted population on the level of dogs and monkeys. How do they know this?
The Emperor Parikshit is a pious king. He is highly celebrated and is a first-class devotee of the personality of God. He is a saint amongst royalty. He has performed many horse sacrifices. When such a king is tired and fatigued, being stricken with hunger and thirst, he does not at all deserve to be praised.
Wow. It's interesting this idea of devolution. I heard a few weeks ago when we were in Taliban for the very first time, the idea of devolution instead of evolution. And right here it says so perfect. We just devolve instead of evolve. Materially things look really good, but internally everything's kind of corrupt and fallen. And so Srini really ruined a good thing. Super tough. Let's go to text 41. Nisamya shatam akad arham narendram sabrahmanonatmajam abhyanta aho batma batam ho mahat adyate kritam alpiyasi draha urur damodritaha. Who wants to start off? We'll do the color content. So,
I think we can do the meters.
Shamya Sakramata Tapam Narendram
Aho Batamo Mahad Adyate Kritam.
Shanya Shaktam Mata Arham Narendram.
Sabrano Ratuja Abhinakitat Apasyaho Damo Jutta
Sabramo Natyamam Abhinandaram
Alpis Yasi Draho Guru Damo Drita
Sabramanamo Namasheka Adibarana
in the hidden corner. Very nice.
Alpayasi Groho Damo Rat
Who wants to do first?
Purple. The king is the best of all human beings. He is the representative of God, and he is never to be condemned for any of his actions. In other words, the king can do no wrong. The king may order hanging of a culprit, son of a Brahmana, but he does not become sinful for killing a Brahmana. Even if there is something wrong with the king, he is never to be condemned. A medical practitioner may kill a patient by mistaken treatment, but such a killer is never condemned to death. So what to speak of a good and pious king like Maharaj Parikshit? In the Vedic way of life, the king is trained to become a Rajarshi, or a great saint, although he is ruling as king. It is the king only by whose good government the citizens can live peacefully and without any fear. The Rajarshi would manage their kingdoms so nicely and piously that their subjects would respect them as if they were the Lord. That is the instruction of the Vedas. The king is called Narendra, or the best amongst the human beings. How then could a king like Maharaj Parikshit be condemned by an inexperienced, puffed up son of a Brahmana, even though he had attained the powers of a qualified Brahmana? Since Shamika Rishi was an experienced good Brahmana, he did not approve of the actions of his condemned son. He began to lament for all that his son had done. The king was beyond the jurisdiction of curses as a general rule, and what to speak of a good king like Maharaj Parikshit. The offense of the king was most insignificant, and his being condemned to death was certainly a very great sin for shrinking. Therefore, Rishi Shamika regretted the whole incident.
Wow. Imagine if we held that belief nowadays. The king is the best of all human beings. And it seems like Trinity kind of took this perfect concept of being and ruined a good thing. So, imagine if now we still were able to hold this belief that our rulers were the best of all human beings. It seems like a really far off idea. Our rulers nowadays seem to be much more like shrinking. Or in the case, like right down at the bottom of the where it says, "How then could a king like Maharaj Parikshit be condemned by inexperienced, puffed up son of a Brahmana, even though he had attained the powers of a qualified Brahmana?" In a lot of cases, that sounds kind of like what we get now. What do you think they're meant to lay out the condemnation, but are actually just puffed up sons of people who did something. So yeah, what do you guys think about all this? Just got some pieces over here.
Yeah, one thing that I think that King Parikshit was influenced by the Kali thing. That's why he had a snake like unwantedly. The snake was on the rishi. So what we try to understand by all these things is God is showing some things, even though if you do something wrong, there is a purpose for that with the great people, not with ordinary people. So great people have some purpose. Wantedly they do that even though they know that it's wrong.
Yeah.
And also in previous ages, if they had a bad king, the prophets could actually curse. Kings we had nowadays like 75.
Yeah, go this.
It's the point of lamentation that Brahma was prevented because of the mistake of his son, which shows that he's very high character. But another lamentation actually was on the part of Parikshit when he put that snake after just short time after he had done his father's. What did I do? How did it happen that I did this horrible act? He was like lamenting of that. So it's a show of a great character. If a person commits a mistake, and they're thinking, how can I actually do that? And this person is victimized, is thinking, no, I'm not. No, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm right. There's no even like question of that there might be some mistake.
What makes such a wonderful king, such as Maharaj Parikshit, is that everything he's doing is as a service. And so something that if it wasn't done as a service would be bad. If it's done as a service, not for his own selfish interest, but as a service to Krishna and as a service to his kingdom, with the consciousness of what's best for everyone, then it's not condemned. Similarly, there's a story in Chaitanya Charitamrita. The servant of Lord Chaitanya, he would massage Lord Chaitanya's legs. And it's an offense to step over the Lord. It's an offense to step over Lord Chaitanya. So, but he needed to do his service when Lord Chaitanya was sleeping. So he stepped over Lord Chaitanya, which is a so-called offense, to massage the Lord's legs. But then once he was finished doing the massage, he wouldn't step back over the Lord to eat prasadam, to honor prasadam, because that was for his own, his own sake. So when the Lord woke up, he was like, "Why are you still there? And why have you not taken prasadam?" He said, I can make a defense for service, but not otherwise. So similarly, it applies to the king. If the king is a bad king and is not doing it in the mood of a service, but is doing it in a controller, then what you said, Gopal Brahma, is curse that king. But if the king is actually trying their best, just like a surgeon is trying their best to save the patient's life, even if something happens that's out of the control of the surgeon and the patient dies, that person can't be blamed because they were trying their best.
That really comes back to our intention, where you might be doing something out of line, offending someone in the name of service. It all comes back to where is our intention. And so in this case, going back to previously, could it be said that him putting the snake on the ground, that was service? Or would it be more of that he was acting out of passion because the Brahma to offer him the respects he expected?
That was due to ultimately the Lord's internal yogamaya energy, bewildering Maharaj Parikshit so that this could happen, so that the Srimad Bhagavatam could be spoken for all of our benefit. Sometimes the Lord has put his devotees into so-called illusions so that something can happen for the benefit of the whole world. But if that's the deeper level, but on the surface level, that seems to be a moment of weakness, not in the mood of service, just a mode of weakness because he was thirsty. So yeah, I guess a step deeper would be that even if someone as great as him makes a so-called mistake, then it's to be forgiven. And there's a verse in the Bhagavatam about that for a great, maybe maybe one of you all know the Sanskrit, but like basically if a saintly devotee makes a mistake, they are still to be considered saint. But do you want to say
That's chapter 9, verse 30. Even if one commits the most honorable act, if he's engaged in devotional service, it's the same because he's properly situated. He quickly becomes righteous and thanks God. Third holy origin.
Do you remember that theme of gold in the previous chapter? So I heard, maybe I heard wrong, when King Parikshit cheated Kali previous chapter by giving him to reside in gold and then took all the gold himself to use it for a good purpose. In a way, Kali didn't have any place to go. But King Parikshit had a golden crown. So this is why King Parikshit was covered in a way and did in a way improper act. Because himself he was influenced ultimately by Lord's desire, so everything can unfold. But there was a little touch of Kali in that particular act.
Also interesting that Maharaj Parikshit was in and hunted, cursed on a hunting trip. Such as, I heard explain one time that such as there's going to be a reaction. They're duty down in nature's effect. So if they really, duty down to the effect.
So in this case, and kind of taking it into our own lives. If there's an offense committed, let's say we see something, how do we know that how do we know how to respond correctly? How do we know how to witness something happen and not blow it out of proportion, not get caught in our inner extremities, and then how do we be able to gauge something as, oh, this being was doing this from a place of motive goodness. They were doing it in the mode of service, so it's, I'm just going to allow it to be. Or if we recognize something that's like this, this just seemed off. Like, how do we really gauge these things, and not just suppress our feelings all the time? Able to react with the appropriate media.
This is a really good question. I've been facing this myself. I think one of the big things is not to sweat the small stuff, like the other people, they might do things that, might not seem correct, but I just like have to look at myself. Like, how many times I do stuff like that, or, that I totally have the capacity to do something like that. So, there's a level of like humility, understanding that comes with that. But then the second part is like, sometimes I feel like you gotta like go somebody's grill, tell them like this is not okay, like you gotta get out of here with that. So
I think it's difficult too in an environment like this where there's very much an air of like working very, very, very careful with offenses, because if we're acting out of line, such really affect our love of God, affect our devotion. We're incorrectly correcting a Vaishnava or a senior Vaishnava. There's all these intricacies, all these intricate little rules, and so how we can know how we can treat our heart also true to the situation.
I would start with questions. Always start with questions.
It's really
Example of how to avoid offenses. Prabhu Goswami, one of our foremost acharyas and foremost disciples of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, once he was meditating, he would actually see this division of pastimes, Krishna instead of pastimes, and something happy happened, something funny happened there, and he was deeply in meditation. France was chanting Hare Krishna, and then suddenly there was one person, devotee who was slightly invalid, has some deficiencies, physical deficiencies. So, but Prabhupada Swami saw him, but he smiled in meditation because was, I'm not going to details, but was some funny pastimes with Krishna, and this devotee thought that Rupa Goswami was laughing at him, and he became offended. But what happened to Rupa Goswami? Meditation stopped. As I realized, oh, I cannot anymore see Krishna's transcendental pastimes. Even how hard he tried to assault it, his brothers are some perspective might offend somebody. And how he found out that the offended and all the Vaishnavas peace, but this one devotee came. So he knew, okay, something is there. So he found him out and apologized. Even if it was unintentional. But the point is that through our spiritual practice, if we will space, spiritual practice, chanting Hare Krishna, question ourselves, did I commit some offense, did I make some mistakes? Was I read disrespectful to somebody?
Yeah, I think in all of these cases, what will help is Vaishnava etiquette, or understanding of Vaishnava etiquette, in which the inexperienced boy was not so much aware. And in both cases, either we offending others or feeling offended, it's good to resort to giving a benefit of the doubt. And as Kakan Prabhu the other day, so just inquire about it. There's no point of like dwelling on it. As a matter of fact, the more you dwell on it, So just keep it. So just, as soon as you notice some skepticism, some feeling that there might be, immediately should be addressed. And by the way, it is an offense to take an offense.
It's an offense to take it.
Yeah.
It's the spiral.
Why would we take any offense?
Wait, and that is like two birds like who deadlock and spiral down. Have you seen that before? They like hold hands.
Oh yeah, it's two birds.
Yeah, they spiral down. Okay. But yeah, I think that's a really powerful question, and because sometimes it's not always about intention. Like Rupa Goswami had no intention to laugh at this man or assumingly laugh at this man, but he felt that way. And I've had a similar experience in my life where we were at some Memorial Day event at a Prabhu's house, and Advaita was showing Sheilas, and I was just like kind of happy or giddy, and I was like giggling, and then the man comes in the room and is like, "You don't think God could be in this rock?" And I was just like, "Whatever, dude. Like, you misinterpreted me, but I didn't really care, like, 'cause I knew like where I was at." But then an hour later, I was in the kirtan and I just had like a total like crisis of faith. I'm like, do I even believe in this? Like, what even is, like, what am I doing here? And like, and yeah, it's really powerful. And I never intended to offend that man, and nor did I have any ill intent. But we do have to be mindful about how we're being perceived. It's a weird line.
Yeah. It seems that being offended and offending is really a crisis of the false ego. It's like the offending is the perverted action of the false ego, and the offense, feeling offense, is like the perverted perception. It's this, all of it Krishna sees and just quit. And stop doing this. Stop thinking that you're so important and stop acting out of your prideful self-importance.
So, thank you very much for opening this discussion. It's very important. I'll give you some examples from my life of this discussion. Everyone has kind of given one side of it, I feel. So I want to try and balance it out. Spoken about how we should be cautious of thinking of holiday. But sometimes that can lead to staying silent or not doing something for our main problems. So this verse, for example, from Bhagavad Gita, in the purport, Prabhupada clearly explains that this goes for like maybe a once-off accidental offense, right? This really does not refer to someone who is again and again doing something out of line, but still practicing it. It's not that in those cases, okay, he's a devotee, might be doing something really bad every now and then. It's going to happen often, but it's not doing it. Sometimes. So when I joined back in South Africa, there was a brahmachari, very, very serious and fired up. He was making devotees out of all of us. It's an amazing project. He just moved into a house with two male students and like made them devotees and started preaching on campus. Amazing person. He was very learned, studied Sanskrit, and just all around incredible sadhana. However, he had some anger issues, and this is kind of a toxic cycle in South African culture. There is very negative towards each other. So he had these anger issues, and he would do ridiculous things. Like my one friend, there was this stubble. They like dragged him to the altar. Do you see anyone here? Do you see any of our acharyas with any Krishna? You know, stuff like that.
Hey, wait till try.
Well, yeah, so that was like. I can give you many other examples, but no reason to do that right now. But it was really intense. He had a really intense body. expressed a lot of regret. And we were all young, we were all new, so we were all just like, yeah, you know, this is sunshine life, it's not just, gotta give us some tough love every now and then. But this person eventually gave up his Christian consciousness, and even now, it's just kind of like expressed from his heart to many of us. He wants to get back into it, but it just hasn't been fixed for his spiritual life. So I just thought I'd share this little anecdote. So we should be careful. Yes, like everyone has, both sides are there. Like everyone has said, be very careful of not just taking offense at everything, but at the same time, there is something that seems off. Maybe something should be said. And you can still follow the etiquette. Maybe you can go to that person's senior. You know, there's always someone above. There are ways of doing it. Just what I shared.
Now we should excuse the minor offenses, but the last sentence in that 930 report says, if he does not improve his character, then he's not to be considered. And in 931, it's explained, you know, we shouldn't, is that, you know, as an excuse, something to that.
Yeah, just in the light of what Gopi just said, I just want to make it clear that when I said an offense to take an offense doesn't mean that one remains silent. It's a matter of not taking an offense, but like I said, giving the benefit of the doubt and inquiring, even expressing our feelings. That's perfectly fine. Actually, it is desired because we cannot have a relationship unless we are capable hearing about how others feel and also being able to express our feelings. That will help the situation. But being silent, in denial, and God forbid being enabler of abusive situation, that's not what it means.
Your Guru Maharaj says something very beautiful about it. He says that we shouldn't give someone a temptation they can't resist. So it's also how if someone is abusing, doing major offenses over and over again, it's not a service to them to allow yourself to be abused, because that's just going to implicate them further in karma and offenses. So actually, you can, like, without taking offense or forgiving if you have taken offense, you can speak up and tell the proper authorities, and not allow that behavior to continue as a service to that person. You can create a boundary as a service to that person and maybe love them and respect them from a distance. And then I also wanted to say, you know, for minor offenses, like if for example a devotee has been offended by something that you didn't mean to offend them, you didn't have that intention. I've had that happen to me before. There's also two other very practical things that you can do. One is, you might want to share the worshiping in the mind thing. You want to share that one, then I'll share the other one.
Yeah, I heard it from disciple of one of the spiritual master Prabhu, and it was explained that if we have some ill feelings towards the devotee, we feel that with someone, and sometimes we're not even proximity to the devotee, or we just kind of express ourselves in circumstances, but one is very practical thing what he recommended was that we try to perform simple puja like Tulsi puja, who's a plant, Tulsi, the same mantras we perform, and others in our minds, there's a lotus feet of such devotee, and that helps. So,
And another thing that we do is also do some practical service for them. Because when you serve someone, it pleases that person. So you beg forgiveness by offering them a basic So I remember I one time had this thing, it happened when I lived in a decent temple someone brought a number that maybe it wasn't my intention at all. And they were doing like flower service and staying up really late in the night or something. And so I was like, I'm just gonna go help them with their service and stay up with them. You know, I don't, I like many hours with them and just like be their menial servant. And it definitely softened that person's heart. Like when you just take the humble position and just do the service.
It seems to be not a priority level, because really once we it's conscious, conscious of how it affects ourselves, how we're conscious of how these things are others, and then able to step into flow of like, oh, I mean, consciousness is everything. Yeah, false egos, I'm going to be a thing. The flow is, how can I serve? How can I, humble myself? How can I get back into my position and also recognize, okay, I've hurt me. I did something that I didn't intentionally. I can come up with a nice little trick to serve. I might fold his laundry. It's nice job somewhere where to find. So I'm not pleased. So what are your thoughts on that? Is that really we step into the higher understanding? It's not just about myself and time. It's about me. All of them.
I think I kind of have like a parallel question about um so if someone doesn't communicate and you're sensing like, oh, I hurt Nate, where's the line between like not assuming like what's going on in their own personal life and also yeah, just being tolerant with people, like yeah, maybe they're not sleeping well or something, like maybe it's not about me, like it usually isn't. So is it ever safe to assume that we hurt someone, or should we rely on people's communication skills? What if they have really poor communication skills? Are they going to last as a devotee? Maybe that's
Yeah, I think that's where it raises questions, because we must inquire, and we must inquire in a way that's not assumptive. If we're inquiring and say, I've heard you, how are you? What did I do to you? And it's very self-centered. It's like, tell me how I can serve you so I cannot hurt my spiritual life. Right?
yeah.
And the flow, I feel like, is so subtle. We have to be so aware and so light, so careful, and really attentive. I feel that the real magic comes in the attentiveness. If we're really paying attention, caring, we're only going to be attentive if we care. And then if we're attentive, then we can actually understand, okay, how can I receive this person? How can I not get caught in my own assumptive false ego nonsense? And actually, even if it wasn't about me, how can I actually be a butterfly coming to, bring some nectar to this flower and just serve this person? So that's what I feel like is really the essence of the assumptions. I got caught in a situation recently where I was so filled with my own assumptions that I thought I really offended someone, and it just caused me nothing but unnecessary lamentation. And then I realized, like, oh, it wasn't that big. Oh, it's just completely. It's a tricky game, but I think care, the attentiveness, and then no matter what, it's always great to be service. Great. Or John, actually, John, you were
That kind of covered it. I was on that same.
Hearing all of you share, I just want to ask, would it be safe to say then that offenses only exist both ways, being offended and offending others, due to our ineffective way to communicate our emotions? Yeah,
it's, we stagnate or we see someone else's stagnation and it makes us like, why are your emotions not being expressed correctly? You don't express it's that locking arms downward spiral. Yeah. And then it's so tricky though, because there's cases like what Prabhu was talking about where someone, generational trauma that comes in this process of the Monarchy starts expressing that in really destructive ways. So this whole journey of emotions is really challenging. Something I saw when I first came into, I had this wonder of how do people who really come in with a lot of pain, how do they dance between suppression and correct expression? How does ISKCON have a means for really allowing people of all levels of emotional intelligence to have a platform? People at the highest level, there's some in this community who are really, really powerful emotional intelligence, and they need to be leaders, all the way to people who have come in really deep trauma, and it's hard for them to get past that to advance in spiritual life. So how do we create a platform for all levels? And do we have those platforms?
Welcome to the hospital of the heart.
Such an amazing question that shows your really deep level of maturity to ask that question. Because sometimes there can be the mistake in spiritual life of, yes, ultimately chanting Hare Krishna cures everything, right? And chanting Hare Krishna gives that pure devotional service. But in the process of anartha-nivritti, in the process of devotional service, exactly what you said, we all come from different places of emotional intelligence, different places of trauma, different life experiences, and all of us have emotional, psychological things that we need to work through. And yes, it is true that ultimately by surrendering to Guru Prabhupada Krishna and by going very, very deep in our devotional service, that all of those obstacles can be overcome. However, it is still absolutely necessary on the path. Actually, one time someone asked Gary Raj Swami even about taking medicine for psychological issues. And he was like, well, if you have, a physical health problem, you'll take the medicine, right? So what's the difference for, a mental health problem? And I'm not making a statement on like medicine, but I'm trying to say it's the same thing for if we're going through something emotionally or mentally. Our society is maturing, offering so many options for devotees. There's therapy for devotees, counseling for devotees. There's even different ashram counseling, like marriage counseling. There's grief counseling. Ramburu is doing a whole, Ramburu Devidasi Prabhu Temple has a whole like Karuna Cares organization for devotee support. So those resources are more and more becoming available for devotees. And also we have a responsibility living in community to, of course, if someone needs more care, they need to receive the care that they need to help them be able to focus on chanting Hare Krishna, right? If the mind emotions are too disturbed, you need support to help you be able to take the medicine, the ultimate medicine, Hare Krishna, so it can be supportive. And then we as a community, we need to fully accept and support and show care to everyone. We have to understand, the last thing that I'll say is that if someone is dirty but they're in the shower, you don't blame them. So we're all in the shower. Maybe some of us just started the shower, maybe some of us have been in the shower a long time but still need to scrub more, and we just have to be like, yeah, we're all in the shower, we're all in this together, and how can we support and love each other?
It's, you said that, but it might but yeah, are there any, it's not any good questions? Go on.
Not exactly the question, but it's kind of the point of talk about it instead of, as you mentioned, emotional intelligence. And if you look through the our scriptures on the part of emotional intelligence, and I heard this from one of the song explaining the story of Dhruva Maharaj, how he been offended, he felt offended by his father. The father didn't respond to his emotions, such simple emotions. He wanted some care, wanted some protection, wanted to see from the love of his father. But his father didn't respond at all. He didn't reciprocate his emotions. And that whole, his reciprocation, his not acting, was the action for Dhruva Maharaj to go to the forest and from zero status and become more powerful than his he ultimately can't overstop planet, spiritual planet in this material universe. But then I was reflecting on that. The Maharaj said we should address our emotions properly. And if we see what happens in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna has so many emotions. He's in fear, he's frustrated, he's unsure what he has to do, he's crying on the battlefield, and Krishna is addressing his emotions, he's feeling him, he's responding to him. And then if you see the genre from the Bible, there's so many stories of now in this first camp, there's so many emotions, so many people have different difficulties in their life and how to deal with that. And by studying the Bible and even higher than that, there's other examples of how to apply all these examples of Bible and Kirtan, circumstances, Christian movement, or Chaitanya's pastimes, his interactions with devotees, and all that we study in this devotee community to our spiritual masters, guides, those who are being a little further away than us in this journey. We all together we are learning actually emotional, spiritual emotional intelligence, which is in the higher sense of bhakti goes from just studying philosophy. We're going to study Krishna's emotions, how he's feeling, from gradually becoming when we mature from just our emotions, we're going to the place of Krishna's emotions, how he feels towards his devotees, how he cares about us. And in all this beautiful process, we all become mature, we become realized, and we ultimately become cured from all these difficulties that we have, and be able to help each other.
So really, the core is in the sadhana, is in the shastra, is in the practice. If we're able to really intensively, really seriously practice, then we can also have falls.
This committing to this to
And it comes to show, the shastra, the sadhana, this practice comes to show that, of course, spiritual life is personal. It's not impersonal. We can see it on the surface here. There's so much emotion. There's so much life in our interactions. And as there is in our shastra, as there is in the transcendental realms, of course, to even think that Mayavad philosophy, personal realm, is the way. It's kind of the expression of suppression. I just want to merge away. Prashant on the side porch.
Thank you so much for class.
Yeah. Shairada Vidya Jadra India Saika Tive Bele Vichaya Sagare Jagmati Vayati Ravamasutra Jage Jayaka Dina Sansare Krishna Baladoya Moy Kari Bhagavati Vata Swaprasara Niloba Se Anarito Radha Krishna Gunada Preme Dako Tanya Nita Jai Mai Janita Shiva Prabhupada Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Bhagavad Mahaprasadam ki